All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out here today. I am ALON GOREN, the CEO and founder at ANSWERROCKET. With me on stage, Ted Prince. Ted is the group, I got to make sure I get this right, group Chief Product Officer at Cantar. And we'll tell you a little about the company so you guys have context for the rest of the conversation today. And I'm controlling the clicker. So, Ted, would you mind telling us a little bit about Cantar?
Yeah. Thanks so much, ALON, and thanks everyone for joining. So, Cantar is a market research company. We are in 90+ countries, and we help collect both behavioral and attitudinal data for all the biggest advertisers in the world. So 95 of the top 100 advertisers are clients. So if you're Coke or ABI or Unilever and you want to know the penetration of your products in over 90 countries, we have a behavioral panel where people put in all their receipts on a monthly basis. We also have access to about 200 million panelists. So if you want to do a survey about your brand or a survey about innovation or a survey about your creative, we can go to panelists all around the world and directly get feedback from them based on what new products you're launching, new media, your overall brand perception. So we have this comprehensive view of consumer brands around the world, which, as you can imagine, involves a huge amount of data in different languages, different formats. We still, in certain countries, we go door to door to get people's actual physical purchases, because in some places you don't get receipts or you don't have cell phones. So for all the biggest brands, we collect all that data, collate it, and then put together insights for them so they understand how their brand is doing in different markets, not just their brand, but their individual products. So how is Bud Light doing in Malaysia? What's the brand perception? How's the creative ad effectiveness? So we've learned to partner with people as we try to bring all that insights and make it more actionable for our clients. So that's how we got to know ANSWERROCKET.
Yeah, I think that's a great story. We'll get into that in a bit. Let me tell you something about ANSWERROCKET. We've been on a 10-year quest to figure out how to bring AI assistance to data analytics. And when we started that journey, it all seemed a bit futuristic, a bit sci-fi. It turned out we had science projects that proved out that yes, we can essentially understand simple questions and convert those questions to maybe queries, maybe SQL queries directly. And that was the beginning of the journey. What we found, and we'll talk a lot about this, is in the last 12 months, there's been this massive shift in the capabilities of technology to go from simple question and question understanding to all the way to fairly sophisticated understanding, but not just understanding, also creating narratives around the answers. So both sides of the equation are a part that we try to tackle. And as Ted was referencing, we work with a lot of major brands around the world. Some of the brands are joint customers, and we got together to figure out, okay, how can we do this better? How can we apply technology to the vast amount of data that is collected by Cantar every year? So let's begin. I'll set the stage a bit, and then I'll interview Ted so he gets all the hard questions. So I got the easy job here. Essentially, as I was saying, we're seeing that the capabilities of technologies are now are awesome in some ways. In other ways, we still have lots of problems. So where does the problem start? Well, it starts with the idea that in order to have any great answer, you have to have the right data, and ultimately you have to have the right question. And so that vast amount of data is growing by leaps and bounds, right? So if you kind of look at the last 10, 20 years, the invention, you could start with the internet, you could look at internet-connected devices, you could look at social networks. All those things generate a ton of data. And every company that we work with their data storage are going up and up and up. Fortunately, storage costs are going down, but the amount of data that they have available is tremendous. So subsequently, we're in an era now where there's so much data collected. Companies are data rich, but information poor. It's an often quoted phrase. And so we think the fundamental challenge starts with dealing with the data the right way before you can get to the next step. And as I mentioned, the volume of the data is at the heart of the problem, and getting good quality data obviously is going to be critical. So Ted, you've got a ton of experience. The Cantar data is, it's world-renowned in the sense that brands use it to guide how they make their strategic decisions. What are you seeing in terms of the core challenges that companies have around data?
Yeah, so whenever I meet with clients, the one thing that's consistent is they say they don't need more data. They have too much data, and what they're trying to do is, one, make that data accessible, two, derive insights from that data, and then three, make those insights actionable. And so, I always say it's not hard to get more data. It's hard to link the data to drive certain behavior or to drive certain outcomes or insights. And so I think, one of the things that we like about this partnership is it helps you interrogate, AnswerRocket helps you interrogate the data so you can get to a very specific question, get an answer, which one, makes it accessible, and two, makes it actionable. And I think, one of the trends we're going to see is, and it's funny because we primarily deal with insights departments, and I think data is going to be democratized. And if you're an insights professional, that's good and bad. It's good because what you do, which is sort of you're this objective point of view about how your company's doing or how a product's doing or how your brand's doing. But you used to be able to really storytell around it and curate what's going on with the brand or a product. Now I think with tools like AnswerRocket, everyone's going to be able to access the data, so you're going to have to contextualize it and explain, why this went up, but don't worry about it, and that went down, but don't worry about it. So, it's going to be an interesting time. So I think insights professionals are going to be, at the center of a lot of dialogue, but it's going to be a little bit chaotic until it kind of settles down and people can make sense of all the data.
Right. Yeah, we see a lot of that as well. It's chaotic times because there's all this new capabilities coming on board, and some of it is really early, some of it is maturing, but the early stuff leaves a lot of opportunities for experimentation, some of which results in good things, some of which never quite works out. And so let's keep talking about data for a little bit before we get into the good stuff, which is how do we solve some of the problems we're seeing around data. How do you think about where companies want to go with their data, and what are they trying to get done given the mass data that they collect?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's democratizing that data, but in a way that makes it usable and ultimately actionable. So finding ways to pull together your data, link it, drive analytics around it, so you can put together, simple outcomes. And so, one of the things we do a lot of is brand tracking. So ABI, we do their brand tracker. I don't know how many countries. You might know how many countries, but in a lot of countries.
Something like 160.
Yeah. So we do, we see how your brand might have gone up or down, or the Bud Light brand might have gone up or down in a country. And we try to, we pull all that together, but we talk about operationalizing brand, because brand's like this big kind of ephemeral thing. How is a particular beer brand doing, and why does it matter, and what do you do about it? So one of the things with the proliferation of data is how do you operationalize that data and drive it into And there are things that, media is easy to operationalize because you go, okay, we spent a bunch of money on Google and it drove good results. Okay, we're going to put more money on Google. Brands a little bit harder, or new products are a little bit harder. So how do you get all the data from things that are changing in your underlying business to be able to operationalize and execute on that is I think what companies are really trying to figure out.
One of the things that I found fascinating when we started working with survey data is most of the KPIs that we see enterprises have are typically backwards looking. So you're looking at sales, you're looking at supply chain, you're looking at a variety of transactional information. Survey data is one of the unique signals where you're actually looking ahead. You're trying to read into the consumer's mind. And that is one of the only signals you can get to see what will happen in the future, given what we're able to discern from those surveys. So it's fascinating data in that sense. It also creates some data issues in terms of having a piece of data that says, well, it doesn't directly tell you what sales are going to be in the future, right? It gives you a hint.
Yeah.
How do you guys think about the information, the idea that, hey, we've got to take this information, it starts as surveys, but really ultimately we're trying to create signals out of it?
Yeah. So one of the things we invest a lot in, and we have products like Trend AI, which is predicting the future sales, or Link AI, which is predicting the effectiveness of creative going forward. So what we try to do is learn from the past, and we have massive databases that have looked at lots of data based on past results, and then we try to apply it going forward in the future. But as you say, there's no guarantee. It's looking at trends or predictions. Sort of, I talk about it's like the weather. You can predict the weather, but there's not especially in this country, it's not 100% certainty that it's going to be what they say it is. But ultimately, what marketers do want is to understand those trend lines, and so we spend a lot of time building up the underlying models and algorithms so we can really predict what that data, that attitudinal data, that predisposition data is going to do to help brands be successful. Then we actually measure it. We've taken all the receipts and we say, in this country, the penetration of Pepsi is X, and so you can look at sort of that attitudinal intent data and see how well you can predict it. So I think that's that's what makes our job fun. But yeah, you can never 100% be certain because you can't predict. I mean, we were talking to an airline the other day, and we have like really good models, and we can predict to a reasonable amount of certainty. But they wanted us to guarantee the outcomes, and I said, well, that's hard to do. Like oil prices, inflation, pandemics, like there are a lot of things that can impact it. We can kind of look at, all things equal, this is what it's gonna do, but it's hard for us to guarantee the outcome. But we can do pretty good job of getting you very close to the outcome.
Yeah, I don't think even GenAI is going to guarantee the prediction in the future.
Yeah.
But it will do some good things.
Yeah.
All right, so let's sort of switch it up. So we set up this part of the dialogue around the challenges with having a ton of data, right? So some of it is noisy, some of it is just massive. Often the signals come in not as numerical, stick this in a database, but rather as text, right, or other form of unstructured data. So these are all forms of data that ideally would be mined for information and ultimately actions. And this is where we're now seeing generative AI, and specifically led by large language models. I think, let me ask the audience a question. So by show of hands, how many folks use some form of generative AI in their daily or weekly routines? Right? Yeah, so it seems like most people, right, we're kind of crossing that threshold. And there are certain tasks that are almost impossible to do as well without having some kind of a tool that assists you, right? And Microsoft uses the term Copilot, which we think is very, very good way to think about the way AI will evolve in the near term to help folks. And so, for example, in our development team and folks that I interact with around software development, you are clearly behind if you are not using some form of a GitHub Copilot or Cursor.io or some other tool that is helping you finish your thought process in a much more meticulous way, in a way that's allow you to explain what you're trying to do and then actually get valid code, as opposed to just say, okay, let me try to write the thing I'm trying to think is the right way to express what I'm doing, and then try it out, see if it works, debug, and keep going. It's clearly, it started slow, but it's picked up steam to where now, as we interview and talk to folks, you expect them to be able to talk intelligently about how they interact with the tools that are modern tools. And I think that kind of co-pilot and the usage of large language models to solve everyday tasks, just to make us a little more productive, right? In some cases, it's 10% more productive. Other cases, it could be 50% more productive. But this is we're just at the beginning of applying these kinds of technologies. So that's kind of the promise. I think it's clear, at least to us, where the debate, probably as few as 2 years ago, the debate was, do we have good enough models to even solve these hard problems? Are we going to be able to get there? Do we need some new innovation in algorithms? I think certainly the folks at OpenAI already knew a few years ago that no, we've got the exact models that we need to at least get us to the next called quantum leap in innovation that we need around productivity. So the models are there. Now, to go from models to real world use cases, there's a ton of maturity that has to happen. So enterprise ready applications, they're not just flip a model and start deploying, right? There's a whole set of experiences that have got to be wrapped around how do users engage, what is the actual job that you want the language model to do on your behalf, right? And these things take the build out of products. So I think what's happening right now is lots of startups and lots of incumbents and large technology companies are all applying a tremendous amount of R&D to bring the technology, right, to make smarter applications out of their existing applications or invent new ones that haven't even existed yet. But that maturity process takes months, maybe even a small number of years, and so there's a backlog of products waiting to be released. And today we see a lot of demos. We provide a lot of demos, right? But often what we hear at the end of the demo is like, well, show us the real stuff. Like, we see the demo, but how's it really working? And then we're like, no, we've been working this for 10 years. And so we're able to adopt these technologies into a product very quickly, where other folks are just kind of building up their stack to be able to deploy that. So in terms of the promise of GenAI, it's massive. It's probably the largest inflection point that we'll have in our lifetimes in terms of the ability to use compute power to reason, to solve problems that we simply have not been able to do. And so, for us as a software developer in a products company, it's very obvious. But unfortunately, as much as we could see the vision, it takes time to deliver it. So, we're down that road. For you, Ted, you work with a ton of different brands and global companies, and you're seeing how each of them are working around and trying to adopt technology. And obviously, you've got your own challenges. How do you think about the promise of generative AI?
Yeah, and we're sort of thinking about it in two ways. One is, how do we improve our internal processes, which ultimately is good for our clients because it will increase quality and time to value. So one of the things we do, because we provide a lot of insights, is we pull in a lot of data, a lot of ad hoc, open-ended question and answer on an ad or a new product or a brand. And so, it used to take hours and hours for humans to summarize that. This new product from ABI, has this attributes, and this is what consumers think about it, and this is what they're interested in, this is what they're not interested in. So all of a sudden, we can just put all that into a GenAI model trained by us, but it can give a very good first draft of what all that survey data is doing for us. So text summarization is a first use case for us. But you'd think it'd be easy, but if you think about Copilot or GenAI as an analyst, and they come into Kantar, and we've got IP going back 30 years of how to assess a brand based on meaningful difference, salient, or how to assess the creative ad. So we have to train the GenAI how to think like a Cantar analyst would think, so you can really put out the insights and the recommendations in a way that's consistent, because we have a massive amount of expertise. We don't want to lose that. We just want to amplify it with tech. So, in that case, we get a lot of open-ended queries. We can then put a quick executive summary. In summary, you'll still have an analyst, someone from Cantar, review it, but it gives you a very good. So we tested it against actual analysts. We had GenAI go against actual analysts, the same ad, the same data, and not surprisingly, GenAI missed a few nuances, but it made up for the fact that there are no errors. Because sometimes, if humans are doing repeatable manual things, they can have errors. So all of a sudden you have machines doing repeatable manual things. So one use case is internal efficiency. The other use case is to help, and more exciting, and that's what we're doing with the ANSWERROCKET, is to help our clients answer questions evoked by the data, invoked by the insights that we put together. So we'll put together, we used to try to put together a very comprehensive set of insights and try to answer every question that a client would have. And now we don't need to do that. We can figure out, here are the top 10 things they care about, and then they'll just ask questions nonstop. So before, we would have to think about every eventuality, which inevitably we'd be wrong, because the CMO comes in and thinks, gets a question from an analyst and is not thinking about a different thing. And so then we have to kind of go back to the drawing board. So it's really the ability to be super flexible in answering any question versus us trying to be completely comprehensive and trying to figure out all the questions that brands have. So I think that's really, to me, that's the most exciting thing, because we have so much human insight, and we try to predict what matters to a brand based on what mattered a couple months ago or last month. But it's always going to change, and so now we have the flexibility to really interrogate that data and bring the insights forward more effectively for our clients and customers.
That's great. So we've got a demo that you guys, I think, will probably want to see. I'll just kind of fast forward through some of the questions. Will AI replace humans? I think yes.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Not in your lifetime, though. You're fine.
Yeah,
it's the next generation.
Yeah, we see it. There'll be humans setting up a study, and there'll be humans delivering the insights. A lot of the processes in between there, that's now done through manual intervention, you'll be able to automate, which is super exciting, because, by the way, like that group of tasks, if you look at our company, you have massive turnover of people doing those tasks, because it's not interesting, it's repetitive. Mm-hmm. You don't really feel like you're growing. So, our goal is get those people delivering the insights, setting up the studies, and not doing all the manual.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's a lot about automating tasks and figuring out the best productivity enhancers. Okay, so let me introduce you to, I'll let Ted do the introduction. Cantar Brand Now is a tool that exists today. It is the tool that we are working jointly on enhancing. We'll give you a little bit of a demo, but for context, you want to talk a minute about just what is Brand Now?
Yeah, so we do these long longitudinal brand trackers. We do them once a year. That kind of gives you how your brand is tracking versus last year. We got feedback from a lot of clients. They want more immediate feedback on how their brand is doing and the competitive and how competitor brands are doing. So we created a product where we go out to survey every day, and we asked 100 people about, call it 18 brands and say quick serve. So what do you think of McDonald's? What do you think of Pizza Hut? What do you think of Pizza Chef? And we go out to consumers, so you can sort of see the ups and downs using all of our IP and our meaningful difference salient framework. So we contextualize all that movement, but it's a lot of data, and there's a lot of things to interpret. So we work with ANSWERROCKET to try to make that data more accessible. You obviously can get dashboards. You can dig in and play around with the dashboard, but you also can say, how is McDonald's doing against Taco Bell? And it will just give you that answer instead of you having to dig for it. So
I'll roll forward to the demo. We can talk about what we're seeing here. So essentially, ANSWERROCKET. One more click. There we go. All right, this is the starting screen. What you'll see is a series of questions being asked and answers provided. Each question is worded in no particular way, so a user can just say what's on their mind. ANSWERROCKET's job is to first understand the intent of the user's question, takes that intent and then maps it against a known set of tools, which we also call skills, which the language model has access to. And so the job of the language model initially is just to figure out what did the user ask and how would I possibly even answer it by picking the correct skill. Once the skill is run, the skill itself is responsible for doing the numeric analysis. So it decides where do I pull the data from, how do I do the transformation of the data, how do I do the calculations, so the initial job is a kind of a numerical analysis. But it doesn't stop there. So after the numerical analysis is complete, and what you see is the results may look like a spreadsheet or a table or a grid, it continues to take that analysis and essentially rewrite that spreadsheet as text and to say, okay, here is the raw text that represents what these numbers say. That text isn't very friendly. If you try to read that text, it would read very monotonous. This is kind of, I would call it last generation of NLG. And so what we do from there is we take that text, which is made up of facts that we extract from the database, and ask the language model, write me a narrative given these instructions. And the instructions are a combination of what the user wants, like I want a short or long narrative, as well as the kind of context that's available. For example, Kantar has a proprietary framework called the MDS framework, which helps you understand kind of an ultimate number for your brand power. But that's driven by a series of underlying measures. And so by literally explaining to the language model, here's how you should interpret these facts, by giving it those kinds of instructions. Please write us a narrative, make it a short one, a long one. We get something that's entirely factual because it's based only on those facts. And it's actually very interesting to read. As you'll see, many of the answers read as if an analyst sat down, spent a half a day trying to tease out the numbers and write out the key messages. And so that was kind of what you see on the screen. So besides narratives, of course, every good skill also knows how to present the data to its user through a visualization. Visualization can be optimized for, if it's a time series, right, you're showing it as maybe as a line chart. If it's a, something that's shown part of whole, maybe it's a pie chart and so on, right? And then there's lots of nuances. Part of the nuance in delivering the right kind of visualization is often to know the context of who are these users and what are they accustomed to? What are they looking for? And so that means that when we work together to build skills, we're working, one, on the kind of analysis, but two, and often this takes much longer, exactly what should it look like? Down to the point of like, well, this brand actually should be in this color because that is their dominant logo color. I'll go ahead and show you guys another shorter version of a video. This one is focused specifically on a problem that we set out to decide how should we solve the problem with more strategic questions. And the strategic questions may be in the form of, what are my biggest opportunities? What are my biggest threats? Right? These are kind of vague questions. If you said, all right, let's ask the database what it thinks are my biggest opportunities. That is a very poorly defined question for a database. But given a layer, which is the skill layer, that says, I know how to interpret that, and I know what to do about that request, we can generate a much more intelligent response. So let's proceed. Right. So the technique here is to break out the opportunities based on a 3x3 grid, right? So often you'll see consultants coming up with a variety of kind of SWOT analysis or grid style analysis. The usefulness of the grid is that it's very easy to interpret what does each box mean, right? There's a playbook, or there's a corporate strategy you might apply of what to do about each metric that resides in a specific box. The actual coordinate of, in this case we chose, is how important is the measure versus how well is my performance. And so the top right in green is the most strategic priorities. Those are things I need to do well on. The bottom left are not important things, but the opportunities are all over this grid, either to increase my spend because I am not performing good enough on a measure that really matters, or reduce my spend if I'm doing too well. I'm performing really well, but that measure doesn't really matter to the consumer a whole lot, right? And so this kind of analysis, while in this case we're showing strategic analysis related to thinking about how to apply, let's say, your media spend or your marketing messaging, same kind of analysis can be performed for most businesses, right? Most businesses try to figure out, okay, which line items do I care about, which I don't. The skill itself is transferable between a variety of different domains or industries because the underlying analysis is very different. What's unique is then, after you perform the numeric analysis, the idea of saying, well, what should I be doing about a quadrant, let's say, that says, or a tile that says, critical gap, right? What's the playbook for actioning those items? Well, that playbook is going to depend on what measures showed up there. And this is an opportunity where we see companies are really leaning into the idea like, hey, we know how to solve these problems. We've got operations all over the world. We see these problems every day. Maybe this year we're going to see it in one country. Maybe we'll see it in one brand. These are repeatable kind of solutions that often when you have enterprises that span lots of combinations of business units or brands, that they have well-known procedures that they want to apply as a first line of defense, right? There's always kind of like, well, the strategy may or may not apply, but it's critical to at least start by providing some guidance, some prescription as to what to do about those key measures. So that's where AnswerRocket fits in on top of the BrandNow data. And if you think about the integration, BrandNow represents this wonderful daily available time series and a set of dashboards that are designed to show the most important information. AnswerRocket can answer the ad hoc questions as you look at your dashboard and you want to know why is there a problem in a specific brand in a specific region. Okay, and I'll click through here. So one of the things that we're showing here is not only can you ask questions by typing them in, but often actually having a conversation is not the best paradigm for doing everything. If you can imagine having a spreadsheet with 100 cells in a grid, you want to click on something in order to, instead of describe what's in that cell and ask a question about it. So there's a convenience paradigm here. We see chat as the overall conversational model, but often there's details into how do I perform the next action once I get started. So in this case, we were showing you can drill down on one of your key opportunities and see, hey, how are the competitors doing? It types out the question on your behalf, and essentially you get to see, like in this case, I didn't set up everything where. This is the data set. The data set you guys are looking at, if you haven't already surmised, is quick service data from the U.S., and so therefore you're seeing brands there that are U.S. brands. All right, we ran a little long, but hopefully we delivered most of the information. Ted, you got any quick thoughts you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, thanks so much. I think, as we look at insights, I think the next 2 to 3 years is going to move faster than the last 10 years. So I think it's hugely exciting, and huge kudos to AnswerRocket, who's been at this a long time. And before GenAI was a hot thing, they were working on natural language queries and other things. So it's been really fun to partner with them. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Ted. Appreciate all the kind words, and you've been a terrific partner as well, and look forward to a long relationship. But thank everyone for coming out here. I think you guys, whether you know or not, you're living in the most exciting times, and the next few years are going to be crazy, so stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.